What is up, guys? This is Zach from Angler's Escape, and today I have a top 10 video for you guys. And to make it interesting, I'm going to go down from 10 to 1 of the top fishing tips for the beginner or the expert. So let's go ahead and get started with number 10. So tip number 10 is using Google Maps or Google Earth to find a great fishing spot. So when I started out fishing, I had a really hard time finding good areas to fish. But then when I started using Google Maps, I found a ton of ponds, creeks, lakes, and even a lot of great spots along the river to fish. And some of my best fishing spots today were found on Google Maps or Google Earth. So if you're looking for a fishing spot, go ahead and get on Google Maps or Google Earth and scout out some. Alright, so now for tip number 9, guys. Tip number 9 is a mistake that a lot of people make, especially beginner fishermen, and that's when they take their lure when they're done fishing and they hook it to the actual eyelet itself of the pole. The reason you don't want to do this is because it creates little abrasions in the eyelid. So then when you have this test, when the fish is taking your line out and you have pressure right here, this line hits those abrasions caused by those lures and it'll cut it. So you don't want to put your lure right there. What you want to do is go ahead and put your lure in either the support for the eyelid, or better yet, usually they have a little hook catch on a lot of these poles that are built in on the rod itself, and just hook it to that. And that's your best spot. The next best spot is hooking into that support beam, and never, if you can help it, hook it to the eyelids, because that'll create abrasions which will cut your line. Alright, so now on to tip number 8, and that is to invest in open-faced reels as opposed to closed-faced reels. A lot of beginners like the closed-faced reels because they're a little cheaper and easier to use. However, they don't last as long and they don't cast as far. So one nice thing about these open-faced reels is when you get water on them, they dry off real quickly, where those closed-faced reels, the water sticks in there with the grit and everything else, really wears down on the reel and it doesn't last that long. So if you can, go ahead and buy the open-faced reels. Alright, so now for tip number 7, and that's that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get great fishing gear. So in front of me I have a few examples where I got some great fishing gear really cheap. Here's 500 trout, panfish, and crappie hooks that I got for $5, so it's about $1 per 100 hooks. I got this off Amazon. It was free shipping, no tax. You can also get it from eBay. But if you're ever looking for panfish or trout hooks, some real small hooks, you can get a lifetime supply for about $5. The other thing I did is I got some big old catfish hooks. These are 10-aught, and I also got some 8-aught catfish hooks. And I got these, it was like 50 for like $12. So instead of paying $1 per hook like I would at Bass Pro or Walmart, this is substantially cheaper and the way to go. And again, I got these off Amazon or eBay, and they're real sharp and they've held up really well. They haven't rusted. And the next thing I'd like to talk about is this scale I got right here. It's kilograms and pounds. It goes to the 100th of a pound. It's very accurate, up to 50 pounds. And believe it or not, this is only $2.50 free shipping, so you can't beat that. And I got this off eBay. But the shipping took about a month because it's coming from China, but it was worth the wait for only $2.50 for this good of a scale. And the other deal I'd like to talk about is even with rods. One of my favorite trout rods and crappie rods is this Daiwa Samurai. It's a really cheap rod. Believe it or not, this rod and the reel was $15. I got it on sale. It was 2 for $30 at Dick's. And so you don't always have to pour a lot of money into a rod. Sometimes you can get away with some real cheap ones that really do work well. And this is an example of that. So you don't always have to spend a lot on a rod. For tip number 6 is using clothespins to keep track of your miscellaneous hooks and swivels. So a lot of times you'll have like a few hooks just floating around the tackle box, and I saw this a year ago where you can just take a simple clothespin, go ahead, open it up, and you can just thread on all the hooks, all the swivels real easily and keep track of them so much better. So this really helps organize the tackle box, and maybe you'll try this tip out. So starting with tip number 5, I have what to do and what to not to do with stringers. So a lot of mistake people make is stringing a fish through the gills. The problem with that is they just don't live as long, so your fish isn't going to be as fresh. So what you really want to do is, even if it's a rope stringer, you want to go through the bottom of the mouth and string that way, so you never go through the gills, because although you're making a puncture wound in the bottom of the mouth, they'll live a lot longer than if you go through the gills because they can't get oxygen. I really like these chain stringers because you can hook them so easily through the bottom of the mouth. The only problem with this is these chain stringers I would not use if the fish is over 3 or 4 pounds, because I found it's pretty easy for the fish to bend these things out. So I really like the rope stringers, but I always go through the bottom of the mouth and never through the gills. Moving on to tip number 4, and that's to fish at the right time of day. All too often people are fishing for the fish species at the wrong time of the day. They're not having any luck, and then the next guy they're hearing like this great fishing report on the lake. And a lot of the times that's because they're going out at the wrong time. So I find usually in the Midwest, dawn and dusk works best for me. If, for example, white bass, I almost only catch at dawn and dusk. I rarely catch a midday. Every once in a while I get a fluke catch here and there. Another example of fishing at night is a lot of times big catfish. I'll only be able to catch them at night when they come in to feed. And a third example is Dustin, Florida a few years ago. I did a lot of beach fishing. It was my first time. I'd fish all day, all evening, catch nothing. And then one morning I woke up at dawn and was catching them left and right. And then I started repeating this pattern and found that I could only catch fish at dawn. And when it was dawn, the fish were just biting left and right. So again, always research and try different times out when you go fishing. Number 3 on the countdown. So now I'm going to talk about the baits. And so when you go fishing, always bring as many baits as possible. A lot of problem that people have is they fish with one bait and they fish it all day. You want to have like 6, 7, 8 different baits. You want to be using artificials, you want to be using live baits, any bait you can. If I'm catfishing, I'll probably have 8 different baits with me. I'll probably have worm, dough bait, crawdads, minnows, I'll have bluegill, and I'll cut shad. I'll be throwing everything I can at them. Same with bass fishing. I'll have tons of different lures. I'll be fishing with minnows. I bring as much stuff as possible, and that greatly increases my odds. And a lot of times I find sometimes the catfish are just biting on worms, and shrimp and everything else is not working. So you really got to try a lot of different baits, a lot of different lures. And another thing is like trout fishing. I have like 6 or 7 different trout baits that I bring every time, and sometimes I find they're only taking one trout bait. So if I didn't have that one trout bait, I wouldn't be catching any trout. And so that just shows the key of using a lot of different baits, whether it's live bait or just a lure when you go fishing. So moving on to number 2 in the countdown, and that's to get a pack of nail clippers. These are extremely useful to put in your tackle box when cutting line. A lot of times I have scissors in there, but scissors are easy to lose, they're bulky, they're a little more dangerous. But if you get like 5 or 6 nail clippers and just spread them out throughout your tackle box, keep them in your pockets, you'll always have something to cut the line. They're super compact, they take up no space. For any fisherman, I recommend getting a few nail clippers for the tackle box. So the final tip on the countdown, or number 1, is when a fish is stripping the bait from your hook, you got to downsize either the bait or the hook. So all too often I see beginners going out there and they're fishing for bluegill or crappie or catfish, and their bait just keeps getting stripped and they're frustrated, they don't know why, they keep putting on more and more bait. And a lot of times people also think, oh, I'll string on a huge night crawler for this little bluegill and I'll be sure to catch him a lot quicker. But the problem is it's too easy for him to strip the bait when you have that big of a bait or too big of a hook. So if you're getting the bait stripped from your hook, you need to start downsizing the hook size, downsizing the bait size, and keep doing that, and I guarantee you'll start catching what's ever taking your bait. So I hope you learned something here today, and thanks for watching.